All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I'm going to be attempting to do a state of the game type video today. I really wanted to, back in January, do sort of a year in review of 2023. I think it was one of the strongest years in the game that we've ever had. But you know, some time passed, I got a little busy, and instead, as we are kicking off February, I do want to just do a generic state of the game. How are things going? What needs improvement? Where do we think the game is going over the next year or two? And the way I'm going to structure this video is I'm going to do basically like a top 3 list. The 3 things that are going the best in the game, what I think are the most promising things, and then the 3 things that need the most improvement and are going to really need to get honed in order for this game to get better. Now, I'm obviously not going to go over every possible topic, and I'm also trying to keep this a little less generic and a more specific to 2023 and 2024, the state of the game that we are in right now. Obviously, you know, there are some constants in this game. If you do not like crystal RNG and that is your least favorite thing about the game, well, I've got news for you. That's not changing anytime soon. Similarly, if your favorite thing is being in an alliance and talking to people through chats and doing stuff together, that also isn't going away. That is personally one of my favorite things about this game, but it's, you know, something that's been around since basically 2015, and we're not going to talk about stuff like that. We're just going to talk about the current issues and things going on. So with that, I'm going to dive right into it. There's going to be some casual gameplay in the background. Let's get into the positives first. All right, so my number one thing that is going well in the game right now has to be the champion design and just the general RPG elements of this game. RPG means role-playing game. It has to do with all the little interactions, all the little locks and keys, and you know, the various utility that champs have to counter nodes and the way that is all working together. I think that team is just hitting it out of the park. We've really seen a trend recently for the champion designs to not only be balanced and good, well-rounded champions, but we really haven't seen any duds, and we just haven't seen any so OP like Hercules that they really give pause to designing any element in the game around that single champion. Now, this balance program, I believe, started about a year and a half ago, where there was a more dedicated look and balance process just to be more transparent. At first, even myself, a lot of people were a little trepidatious about this, but it ended up being one of the best things that has ever happened to the game, as well as I think some of the people that were hired onto the design team. Obviously, we know DLL, but I can tell you that some of the other new designers have been doing an absolutely fantastic job. And we've just seen, I think in 2023, every single champ was a rock star. They just all had some use, some reason to get ranked up. And so far in 2024, we're basically seeing the same thing. And then if there is any shortcomings or if there's any bugs or anything like that that give you some kind of exploit, those are going to get addressed in the balancing process. But we have not seen any champs get nerfed to the ground. We've only seen like minor things being removed, like absorbing man's regen, which wasn't really intended at the start of every single fight. That was taken out. You know, Zemo had some exploits, as did Wiccan, that most people weren't even using them that way, and they're still amazing characters. And then we've even seen some buffs like Danny Moonstar. We're soon going to see the Gladiator buff. So there are really good things happening with this balance program, and you know, it's always been about these fun Marvel characters that we like to play and that we enjoy learning and figuring out all the different interactions and the complex interactions in this game. And now it's just in as good a place as it's ever been, and I think that is really the highlight of this game and one of my favorite things about the game. So now number 2 is going to be kind of an interesting one, because I think there are a lot of, as a preference, I think there's a lot of people that feel like this game still is a little bit of a rat race, that it still feels a little pay to win. But really, if you take a step back and look at 2023, I think we had more participation and low spending events than we have ever had in the history of Marvel Contest of Champions. And just to give you some examples, we have the release of the 7 stars. There was a very easy quest There was an event where even if you didn't buy any paragons, you could net some units and get a lot of amazing rewards in addition to just like getting a ton of 7 stars and paragon crystals that initial month. Then we had stuff like the Legends celebration with those crystals that had all the carb cores in them, and we had the selector of the like Ebony Maw and Emma Frost and Black Panther crystal. We had stuff like Cap's enlistment event, and then those were all free to play, but we also had some low spend stuff like the double track, platinum track events. For example, the most notable one being Morbius, where for $25 over the course of 3 months, that's less than $10 a month, less than the Sigil subscription, you could just get a Morbius, right? A 7-star Morbius. He was the tactic in Alliance War and BGs right after that. I thought that was just great. And then now he's available for everybody, but just getting that little head start for like a very low price, I thought was a really, really good move. So in general, I do think that the game is accelerating a little fast right now, and that like some of the offers that you can get at like the very, very tippy top if you spend a lot do seem kind of insane. But that's sort of always been the case. What I've noticed is that they've sort of brought the floor up a little bit, meaning that like if you don't spend, or if you only spend a little bit, you can still get a really good core of rewards and items. That way you can get a lot through content. You know, even in 2023, we saw that the very first thing of the year was the EOP ending, which had the first rank 5 gem. So anybody that was able to complete that content got their first rank 5 all at the same time. It was pretty amazing. The only people that had rank 5s before that were those that spent like 5 figures in Banquet, and like they definitely earned it. But like the largest part of the player base got it through content. We saw that continue with Necropolis, where Necropolis, and this is getting into my point 3 a little bit, but Necropolis had the best rewards in the game between October and December. They were better than Cyber Weekend, and they were better than Banquet, unless if you went for like top 30. So seeing a transition to content really mattering again, and seeing these sort of participation events like Cap's enlistment event and the 7-star celebration and all that, I think is really, really good for the game. It allows the dollar that a whale will spend to still go far, to still get that advantage, to get ahead, but it doesn't leave people in the dust. There's also so many game modes to play right now that it's very difficult to do everything, but you can kind of choose your own adventure and do the modes that you like doing. And in doing so, you can still get a really, really good amount of rewards. And I really like to see that. So I think that's a good trend for Econ as well. I think their team has been doing a really good job. Just like that RPG team that I was talking about, they're both really, really making some good innovations that are making our game better. Now, number 3 is going to be kind of like the quest design team, but I'm specifically in this point number 3 going to be talking about PvE content, right? Player versus environment, the solo content. Now, at first, I wasn't a big fan of the easier Act 7 and Act 8, but the more I've gotten used to it, the better I like it. I like when there is just relatively easy content to get through with really good rewards that comes out once every 3 or 4 months. And Act 8 has been quite enjoyable. The boss fights have been really, really well designed. It was fun to go through both Act 8 again with the guillotine champs, and then Act 7 with the 7 for 7. Those two types of challenges with objectives were just so much better than some of the Karina's challenges that we had seen in the past, like Labyrinth of Legends with Star-Lord, for example. That was just absolutely awful. So we're seeing better objective-based PvE content with that like guillotine thing and the 7 for 7. I already talked a little bit about Necropolis, but Necropolis was another home run. I thought it was so good, especially with the crypt rewards. So many people participated and it got that first path done more than we've seen ever with Everest content. There were more people playing it, more people having a decent time with it. You can use Aegon, you can use other champs. It was just so well designed. It didn't feel cheap. A lot of people played really skillfully, got a bunch of solos and sort of like cheaper runs. And then, you know, like I said, almost anybody that was really, really serious about the game was able to get at least one path done, get those crypt rewards, which were just absolutely amazing. Now, raids are technically PvE, they are group PvE, and even though the first one that came out was a little rough, The changes that they are making in month 2 seem fabulous, and I'm actually really excited to try it again. I think a lot of those pain points were addressed. I'm not a huge fan of the way the mode was last month, but I do think there's a lot of potential there. And also for an alliance like myself, where we only do map 6, we don't do the highest AQ, being able to do that raid once a month is a pretty low commitment, and it's a huge bump in rewards. So, if you are in the rat race doing high tier war, high tier map 8, things like that, prestige race, you kind of have to do raids. But for a lot of the community, I think it's something that you can opt into and then get like a really, really fun, good bump in rewards just one time a month. Overall, it seems like the coordination and the champs are just going to be better. The nodes and the bosses are going to be a little bit more fair. The Pierce is tuned down. They got rid of some of the prompts for Thanos. So I think overall, raids are very good PvE content as well. And then finally, we have the Winter of Woe coming up. There were some aspects of EOP that I didn't like, especially the last quests. But overall, it was the same designer who made that. It's Kevin, who also made Necropolis. He was the lead designer there. And, we're pretty sure that he's also the lead designer in Winter of Woe. So I do have some very high hopes for that. The rewards look really good. And 8.4 is right around the corner. Plus, we've got all the Deathless pieces. And I'm really excited to see what kind of PvE content comes out this year in order to get all those Deathless pieces and form those champions. So those are my top 3 good things about the game. Now we're gonna change the tone a little bit and transition to things that need improvement in Marvel Contest of Champions. So my first negative is something that certainly in one way, shape, or form has been around for many years in the game, but I do think that the current iteration of various shoddy game mechanics, AI issues, bugs that are really affecting the flow of the game. I'm not just talking about like the generic bugs that can happen on each patch release, but I mean stuff like, if the game force closes, it will remove pre-fights. The fact that the AI is still a little messed up, and it's like you fix one thing and then it causes another problem. So they recently had to revert the AI so that, all those double medium champs like Silk and Werewolf and Tigra, some of my favorite champs in the game, are just getting reparried, and champs still aren't throwing specials. They're still doing their quick light attacks, which are absolutely devastating. And, again, I know all this stuff is trying to be fixed. It's just very present in the game right now, and I just get nervous downloading a patch if I have anything substantial to do in the game, because I'm worried that something crazy is going to happen. And we even just saw it with yesterday's patch with that like complete blackout bug. When stuff like that goes live, it's just a drag, and it's a drag for them, for the company, for the developers. It's a drag for us. And I mean, you can't blame the player base for being upset when there's an unfair AI reaction, or they get reparried, or like they're doing their incursions run and the screen blacks out. Like, you cannot blame the player base for that. That is extremely frustrating, and it just seems time and time again, this type of stuff, like all these like annoying gameplay things, are just happening over and over again. In raids, it happened to us twice on the Ultron boss that people weren't forced quitting. They weren't trying to like exploit their health bar. They actually got kicked out of the game. It was like a memory leak or whatever those things are called, where you just get kicked out of the game and all of our charges got lost. This can happen in incursions as well. And it just makes for a not fun experience. The one time that I did an arena grind, I couldn't go for an entire hour without getting kicked out of the game. So like, there's things like that that are just messing with the flow of the game, and they don't seem to be improving. I feel like the first set of input issues that happened like 2 years ago, I think those did get fixed. I know there are many people that would claim it's still as bad as ever. Maybe that is a truth. Maybe there are certain platforms, certain devices, certain operating systems that are still extremely buggy. For me, in general, the controls seem to be good, but there are just some annoying AI related things, as well as these things that are just disrupting the flow. Like I was mentioning, almost every single fight in the raid that I did would start off with a big lag spike, and that is very rough when you're using like a low AQ revive and you go in there with like only 600 health, and then you miss the first parry and just die, things like that. So I know these are being addressed. I just think they are so prevalent in the game. I'm seeing all kinds of players, from the casual to the ones that are pushing in BGs and War, where there's certain things like the reaction times of specific champions being too fast and you just can't do anything when they're recovering from being knocked down, or special attacks, to just like the weirdest looking war fights where people are either getting parried or like light intercepted in ways that seem a little bit unfair. I know that my incursion run recently ended when Ronin was special intercepting me. Like, he was immediately throwing it as soon as I dashed in a way that I've never seen the AI do, and it was like Ronin of all champions. So yeah, there are just a lot of issues, and I really hope that we come to some form of a conclusion, or at least a plateau with these, so that we can enjoy the game more, because it is causing a lot of people to either, leave top tier because it's too frustrating, or just like play the game less, and nobody wants that. Now, number 2 is going to be kind of a big topic, and it's something that I personally feel strongly about, and others may not agree with me. And I also know that because I'm going to be making some kind of sweeping statements here, that, some people might get their feelings hurt, but I just think in general, the PvP modes in the game right now are not going well, and that includes Alliance War and Battlegrounds. Now, there are a lot of good things about both, and I still enjoy aspects of both, so let me just kind of make my case here. Now, in general, PvP in almost any game, whether it's console or a game like this, those are sort of hit or miss for some players. Some people don't like PvP at all, and they're just not going to participate. Often when the development of PvP happens, it is for a niche group. It is for a smaller group. The weird thing about this game is that we're sort of all meant to experience it on some level, because if you're in an alliance, you're going to be doing some form of alliance war, and there is really a lot of encouragement to do some form of battlegrounds for both yourself and for your alliance. So it's sort of like we feel like we have to do them, so I would love for PvP to be as good as possible. So one of the problems with this is when you are trying to go for a niche group, whether that's Tier 1 War or Celestial and Battlegrounds, the experience, like I was saying, that we all have to have is so varied that unless if you are pushing, it sometimes can feel like you're a little bit forgotten. And I think more people would participate if we felt like improvements to these modes were being made for everybody and not just for the people that are pushing. But the thing is, there are actually a lot of people at the top who are also unhappy. Like in BGs, I've heard some complaints, and I think they're legitimate, that the rewards have gone stale. For most of 2023, BG's rewards were some of the best in the game. For a while, it was the only place to get 6-star SIG stones, and you were getting so many of them that you could just SIG up as many champs. Then once stuff like Tier 6 class Catalyst came out, it was pretty much the premium place to get that. Well, now the amount of Catalyst that you can get are really not worth the grind like they used to be. And, relics have kind of plateaued now that people have sort of worked out their prestige, and most people have most of the relics. So in a lot of ways, BG's is feeling a little stale for those people that are pushing for Celestial. And additionally, I've heard a big complaint that as you get toward the top, like if you were going for top 1, 2, and 3, people just stop playing in the last week, and it's impossible to get a match. Like you can just sit there and be waiting for a match for hours and hours, just to try to move up the ladder a little bit. And, those are some of the issues that people at the tippy top are having. And, in general, I just think people aren't playing Battlegrounds that much. I'm looking at my own alliance. Unless if there's some reason to play it, like a special event where there's some extra rewards, most people are barely playing. And I think it's a little bit of a failure that so few people are participating in it. And that just means I don't know what needs to change, but there needs to be some changes. Now, similarly, I have a lot to complain about with Alliance War, but there are complaints at the tippy top. We look, so again, if they're trying to make these PvP modes niche for the people that are pushing them, it seems like they're mostly unhappy, and then it seems like people that are more casual are also unhappy for different reasons. Now, Alliance War currently it has like a loyalty and potion economy situation, which I know there are improvements coming, but when we released the last Alliance War tactic, It was so difficult and it was so costly, and it also happened to be over Christmas months, which I know not everybody celebrates Christmas, but most of the Western world gets some kind of time off in December regardless. So like it is not an easy time if you have a family, or if whether it's religious or socially, you celebrate any holidays in December. And there was a precedent for, that to be some time off. The Kabam headquarters actually shuts down for a week around Christmas, so there were no devs around. So like I think it would have been a perfect time to delay a little bit, but they did not. And then on top of that, the loyalty costs and just the way potions worked, the way iteming out worked, it was just a rough season overall to have like the most difficult tactic that we've ever seen. So a lot of people in tier 1 were also not happy, even though there are some people that like the trend of a more difficult tactic. I think that can be good for tier 1. It had some pretty bad knock-on effects for tier 2 though. And that's why I was happy to see that tier 2 is soon going to be getting a separate situation than tier 1 so that things can be tuned a little bit differently. Now, on top of that, there seem to always be bugs with the nodes and with how to enter Alliance War every time. And I think a lot of that has to do when new seasons come, because Alliance War is just super, super old tech. And they just... I don't know what to do, because they can't just like take down the mode again like they did for PvP, because it was down for so long and then it still came back a little bit bugged. But like something big needs to change with Alliance War, because it is just so outdated the way the tech works, and like we're just seeing these knock-on effects of bugs after bugs. Now on top of that, I will say that like in my own situation, like I mentioned a little bit before, we were in tier 2 last season, and that tactic was so difficult. It was just causing way too many deaths and just like a very unpleasant experience. Even though we have access to those free 40% revives, it just made it an absolute drag. And we're still even seeing that a little bit this season. So I'm not a big fan of the last node set with Crush 2.0. I think that is just a little bit too punishing. And you can make an argument it's good for the top 20, but I do know plenty of people in the top 20 that also didn't love it. There are still some pretty big issues with me being in a 2 battle group alliance when it comes to the PvP, and this is because for our officers, it is very difficult to get people in and out of the map, so that when you're only doing 2 battlegrounds, 2 battle groups, and you're rotating people in and out, it becomes very difficult. So I'm looking forward to a time where they can prioritize getting some tools for officers to make those transitions a little bit easier. We've had experiences where our map has not been set for the different tier, because we're right on that tier 2 and 3 line, and then we've had like an empty map. We've had people go on vacation and then not be able to attack, but their defenders are locked in, so we can't get somebody else in. And it's just a bit of a communication nightmare for us trying to do a casual Alliance War experience, maybe get into Platinum, and then especially Cat, but like our officers are just really trying their best to communicate and get the heads up to get people in and out, and it's very, very difficult. So, everything here, right, when it comes to like, I think the rewards are a little outdated. I think some of the experience is bad for some of the lower tier players, but also there seem to be a lot of complaints from the people up top. I just think that we really need to be auditing our PvP modes and doing everything we can to be making them better to catch up with how good the PvE experience is. Now, the last thing I'll say, and this is not necessarily PvP, but I do want to briefly talk about incursions. This is the only other mode that I think is a huge drag currently. And now some people really like incursions, so I don't want to rain on your parade. But from my personal experience as someone not having a ranked up Hercules, I just think it's a little bit of a joke how crazy Hercules is for this one mode, and sort of how he is a key to getting those zone 25 rewards. And that if you don't have him, it's almost like you don't really have a chance if you get bad RNG. There are just certain node combinations where like not having the ability to stun lock or just like do some insane damage with your special 2 or get that really long immortality or things like that, like you're just not going to be able to get through it if you get a certain node combo. And then if you do have Hercules, not that it's like an automatic thing, but it's just like an easy way to pick up those rewards. So I don't know how to deal with that, but for me on a personal level, it just kind of aggravates me. So I am kind of lumping incursions into this list as well. And listen, I know that they're working on it. Again, I don't want to be too negative. I'm just stating the facts here that I think with BGs, I think with Alliance War, there are just a lot of issues from top to bottom, whether they're technical, whether they're design based, the nodes and the champions and things, or otherwise that need improvement. So I'm looking forward to when those changes might happen. But currently I am very happy to not be participating in them as fully as I used to, just because I'm not enjoying them as much. And that is my own personal opinion. Now, finally, my last one, this is my biggest pet peeve about Kabam and the company right now and the way the game is running. And it's basically when things don't get caught before they go live. And now, in my opinion, this is different than bugs. And again, I know sometimes human error is involved and we are all humans. So like, I'm not going to go like with pitchforks to the company, because for them, this is awful for PR as well. But I'm just going to give some examples over the last couple of years. There was that like notorious 10,000 unit offer that was offered once and then twice, and then it accidentally shipped out for everybody again, and so they had to offer it a third time. You may not even remember this period, but this was like, I think at the end of Act 7, there was a way to basically get to, I think it was Paragon, easier by spending 10k units to be getting like rank 4 materials. And they accidentally shipped it out, another chance for everyone to buy it, so that like if you were whaling, you could basically be picking up this thing multiple times and getting a huge head start. It was a huge influx of rewards just because somebody hit the wrong button and sent it out to everybody instead of just offering it to the people that had not bought the offer yet. Basically, it was meant to be like, if you didn't pick up the offer while it was around, now you realize that Paragon is kind of a big deal, you may want to buy it. They allowed people a second chance to buy it, but they ended up giving everybody another chance and eventually a third chance. One of my least favorite things that ever happened was when a PR graphic went out that showed the people that you could vote for the Titan Crystal, and Clairvoyant was sitting on the Mystic poster. I absolutely hated that because I would have loved Clairvoyant in the game, especially more than Juggernaut. And then it was deemed that she was maybe on a rough draft. But like the fact that the graphic design team or the public affairs team did not talk to the RPG team who had decided who the champs were for Mystic, and like nobody checked the work, and this thing went out on all the social media with Clairvoyant, and then she wasn't meant to be in the vote. That to me, that was a huge drag. Like I was legitimately excited and then really disappointed when that happened. There's some other stuff like Bahamut, I think, is still bugged. He is apparently going between phase transitions on the heal sponge node, so like he can get to phase 4 and then go back to phase 3. I don't even understand some of the bugs, but there are things wrong with that, and like it's still in the game. They shipped the 7-for-7, or excuse me, the Guillotine Act 8 challenge with this being a problem, which I'm not a big fan of. There was little things like last season in BGs, the ability accuracy reduction node wasn't working, so they just put Force of Will on it, which really messed up some people's rank up decisions, because Force of Will is like, like a sledgehammer when it comes to AAR. It really just made so many champions like Tigra, Black Cat just like not absolutely work at all. And then you may even remember in the first season of Decay, there was a patch that came out which ended up having like a different list of Decay champions than the ones that were on the list. So again, this is like something was listed, people were preparing, they were ranking up specific champions, and then the Decay list ended up coming out where like champs like Captain America Infinity War that some people had ranked up wasn't on the list. Now they ended up allowing like any champ that was ever listed or tagged to go in on it, which I thought was a good way to kind of like make up for that mistake. But the fact that, things are hit, like they hit the send button and these things go live in the game, it just means that work is not being checked by some human along the way, and it's a huge problem. I can also go back to some side quests or things where the rewards are wrong. Like instead of shards, it'll be like crystals, right? And then all of a sudden there's like a million crystals instead of just like having it be a small fragment of a catalyst. We also saw with Banquet, there was a random tier 4A instead of a tier 3A. So like who is making these decisions and not checking the work that the catalysts are off by like tenfold or 100-fold sometimes? You know, it's like meant to be tier 6 class catalyst fragments and it ends up being like full crystals or something like that, and then you know they have to walk back all the rewards and things like that. That kind of stuff is so annoying. We even recently saw with the Glory, there was something wrong with the peak milestones were paying out as regular milestones. Now I will give some credit where credit is due. Kabam has been a little bit better on how they deal with these situations, a little bit more of a mea culpa, right? So they allowed us to keep a big chunk of the Glory. I think that's always what you have to do. You have to admit, hey, we messed up. We're not going to be too concerned about the economy of the game. We're just going to give it to you. It was our mistake. You can keep the Glory, right? So that's good. I'm glad that they're doing that, but we just don't want to be in that position in the first place. And, you know, sometimes you can't predict these things, but other times if it's like a Black Widow clairvoyant poster, how could nobody have seen that that was about to get pushed on social media and realize that she was not supposed to be there, right? So that level of stuff, like Kabam has improved so much. Like the communication's better in general. The company is just being a little bit more transparent with their players since the beginning of time compared to now. I really think that team is doing a great job. But like these little mistakes that come out of all these like patch notes and all that, like these need to be addressed. And I don't know if there needs to be somebody on production team whose job is just to like proofread stuff, but I'm really just not a fan of when that stuff happens, and we just don't need that in the game. So that is my number 3. Now finally, I have an honorable mention of number 4 for negative, and it's very simple. It is Bullseye. Dude, I am not a fan of the defensive design of Bullseye. I know we've had some tough defenders, like, you know, Onslaught is pretty rough, and Photon and Kindred, but they all have play styles where you can play around them and get through it. Bullseye has an extremely difficult dex on that special one, and really the only way to play against him is to perfectly bait the special one with a bleed immune and then sort of wait out the evade timer. I just don't really like the fact that when you dex you get bled. You cannot push him like a centimeter above 1 bar of power without getting evaded, whether it's like the second hit of a heavy attack or like a second double medium, you can get evaded. And like there should be champs that are bleed immune and have some kind of evade control, like Iceman. And Iceman is even performing pretty poorly against him, in my opinion, because the tempo of the fight is so messed up when you have to immediately bait special ones and things like that, that it's very easy to lose stuff like, you know, Absorbing Man's bleed immunity just falls off. Iceman's cold snap just falls off because of the way that you have to fight him. So in my opinion, there are defenders that are supposed to be tough that require you to learn them over time. I just think Bullseye is a very poor design when it comes to defense, and I really hope that we see sort of our first defensive nerf or changes, because you know, I'm just not a huge fan of him, and like it doesn't even seem like Dust is really going to counter him. So there's just no good counters for him, and anytime he's going to come up, it's almost impossible to not take a decent amount of chip damage, even if you play really well. And you know, I guess we all got to learn that special 1 dex or something, because it seems to be the only way to play him. Most champs that have some kind of evade control, you also have to like set it up. So you know, Elsa or Kate Bishop, like they do have the cold snap, but at some point you're probably going to have to just take a hit to the face on the way up and take the chip damage, plus they're not bleed immune. And then, you know, additionally, like all the true stuff doesn't work against him, ability accuracy doesn't work against him. So that takes out like a bunch of champs that would be able to reduce it, like, you know, Falcon and Crossbones and stuff like that. So yeah, not a fan of Bullseye. He deserves his own point. Even though I am so excited about the champion design, that was my number 1 positive thing. I just have to shout out Bullseye Bullseye's got to change because he is just a detriment to the game in my opinion. So anyway, that's all I got to say. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Let me know what I missed. I did try to only do some like big topics here. I'm sure there's a lot more nuance that we could get into. Hope you're enjoying the game. If not, let me know why, and I'll catch you in the next one.